Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I never quite get used to that enormous picture of that handsome man appearing. Never mind. Welcome to the first of the keynote sessions. These are going to be 3 of these sessions over today and the next 2 days, to enable us to shift our focus away from the bureaucracy of FSC and the immediacy of what's needed right now, to a wider perspective. The next couple of days, the sessions will focus on transforming forest solutions with Indigenous peoples, communities and smallholders, and the value of forest and forest products in the Sustainable Development Goals. But today we're focusing on climate change, biodiversity loss and forest degradation. I think it's going to be quite a fascinating session. So sit back and enjoy it. I'd like to start by inviting Janne Naraka to come and introduce us to the topic.
Mike, thank you, John. Bonjour, buenos dias, good afternoon, hyvää huomenta, hyvää päivää, kollegat. As already mentioned, my name is Janne Naraka, and I am here as the role of Board's Strategic Planning Committee Chair to share with you some ideas about FSC Board work on climate and FSC's global climate role. So first of all, I want to start by warmly thanking our sponsors who made this event possible. So great, warm thank you for all your contributions. If we look at the challenges the world is facing, climate change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, to just name a few, it is evident that we are an organization that can have a lot of offer to tackle all these challenges. And I would say not only options, opportunities, but a responsibility to do so. Forests are very much currently on the global focus on many agendas. I think there is no question about it. There are many, but at the same time, different expectations on forests and the solutions they could provide. With the estimated strong increase in global timber demand, we have to work to expand FSC forest management to bring our impact on new areas. But at the same time, it is important to work on new services to respond to the new demands on forest, carbon, diversity, water, recreation, just to name some of them. So, both of these needs, the traditional forest management and timber coming from it, as well as non-timber ecosystem services, are clearly recognized in our global strategy and are incorporated in our vision for 2050 to have the true value of forest recognized. Now we are taking the first steps towards that vision and are starting to build that second leg for FSC, in addition to the traditional forest management leg we have had for 28 years now. And the goal is that by 2026, we have concrete tools in place to expand the reach of FSC and its relevance in the fight against climate change and loss of biodiversity. And while doing so, we make FSC bit by bit more relevant actor in providing new tools for governments, companies and consumers to respond to these new needs on emission reduction, restoration and so forth. Then 2 slides about the process the board has been conducting during this year. So it is important to mention before starting that this is just the beginning of the journey. So we have debated this in few meetings during this year, but we are not there yet. We are just starting. But the impetus for all this work has been within FSC, the motions adopted in the last GAs, especially motion 20 on climate emergency that was adopted in the last virtual GA 2021. And the motion is calling for stronger actions from FSC to mainstream climate in all our work and processes and position FSC as a forerunner in climate front. And as a board, it is our task to supervise the implementation of this motion. So the board strategic planning committee and then the whole board, as said, we have discussed this in our meetings during this year, and we have generated a draft positioning paper on climate. And I think that is a paper you can also find in your GA package. And since there are many important aspects relating to climate change, there are also other documents linked to this climate positioning paper. For example, a separate paper on biodiversity and more technical papers on restoration and carbon markets, all supporting the strategic positioning paper on climate. So, how does the board see that we could do what we are expected to do? Our clear ambition is that FSC will bring forest to the center of coordinated climate actions, and by that, at the same time, make FSC a central actor on the climate front. And how do we actually plan to do this? First of all, we will promote our current solutions with climate impact. Some examples of this are expanding FSC FM certified forest area globally, and also implement the remedy framework when it enters into force. But in addition to just promoting what we have to develop new solutions to strengthen and diversify our climate impact. For example, develop new concrete tools to increase global forest area through restoration and afforestation. And this work is already in the process, but in the beginning phase more or less. And of course, we will revise the ecosystem services procedure to expand services and strengthen also the market link. And this work has already started and might actually be impacted by the decision of this GA with regard to ecosystem services motion. And along the lines of global strategy, we will not do this alone, but we will build partnerships with reliable partners and especially with the financial sector, with the aim of supporting the use of FSC as a tool to decrease risk in forestry investments that the financial sector is supporting. And this is my final slide. So we want actually now know what you, the members, think of all this, and whether you think that we are on the right track at all, or whether you think that we should do something totally different. So I would kindly ask all of you to use this opportunity provided by this General Assembly and to contact the board members and tell your views directly to us. But we know that not all members are here and that not all members have the possibility to talk to the board members in the corridors of GA. So that's why there will be a separate public consultation process on the climate position paper starting around mid-November. In addition to that, there will be a public webinar organized before the year end. So I would say there will be plenty of chances for you to tell what do you think, what should be FSC's role in climate front, in climate change adaptation, mitigation, and related aspects on biodiversity, carbon markets, etc. So I thank you for your considerations, and we are looking forward to your comments here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jana. And I'd now like to, we're really lucky to have a video here from Minister Lee White, who is the Minister of Water, Forest, the Sea and Environment of the Gabonese Republic. Please can we run that video?
Let me start by saying how sad I am not to be with you in beautiful Bali. I had been really looking forward to being at the FSC meetings, but the international program right now seems to be stacked with multiple events in the post-COVID period, and I just couldn't make it. 50 years ago, the world came together in Stockholm in the first major environmental conference. And this year we celebrated Stockholm plus 50. Now, the late President Omar Bongo Ondimba went to Stockholm 50 years ago, gave a very strong speech, and came back to Gabon and immediately, and for the first time, created my ministry, the ministry dedicated to the environment. 20 years later, in Rio, again, President Omar Bongo was there. He made commitments, and when he came back to Gabon, he immediately signed into existence our first environment law, and he initiated the process to revise our forestry law, making forestry, making sustainable forestry obligatory in Gabonese law from 2005 onwards. In 2002, Rio plus 10, Omar Bongo announced the creation of 13 national parks covering 11% of Gabon, the beginnings of Gabon's vision for a synergy between sustainable forestry, regulated by the forestry law, and conservation and community forestry in national parks and community forests. Some years later, President Ali Bongo Ondimba went to his first big international conference in Copenhagen, and he made commitments that forestry would work as a tool, a nature-based solution to fight climate change. And we also finalized the REDD+ process that had been proposed in 2005 by Costa Rica and Papua New Guinea. Then, in Rio plus 20, 2012, Gabon was there again, and 2 years later, we passed our Sustainable Development Law, further signing into law the principle of sustainable development, the principle that forestry needs to be sustainable, needs to work for the Gabonese people, and it needs to work to fight against climate change and against the biodiversity extinction crisis. In 2017, there was a hiccup. Gabon's National Parks Agency, instructed by the president, worked with the Environmental Investigation Agency on an investigation into illegal forestry in Gabon. To our chagrin, we discovered that illegal forestry practices had taken off subsequent to the ban of export of raw logs that the president implemented in 2010 with a view to capturing more of the forest economy within Gabon to make our sustainable forest management more viable. With EIA, AMPN, and our forest agency discovered that we had a $300 million a year illegal forestry operation ongoing in Gabon. This involved fiscal evasion, hiding profits in offshore bank accounts. It included illegal forestry practices, logging undersized trees to protect trees, and logging outside of concessions. And Gabon had to take drastic action. The president's first reaction to this crisis was to declare all forestry operations in Gabon needed to be FSC certified by 2022. That was because the president already had experience of FSC permits That was because in our investigations, the FSC certified forests in Gabon were performing much better. And that was because we felt that we needed to bring in an international watchdog to validate management practices in order for Gabon to maintain its market share into the future. Obviously, we also initiated reforms within the forestry department. We started working towards a traceability system that will ensure that QR codes follow trees, living trees in the forest, all the way to the port and to their destinations outside of Gabon. We initiated an e-governance system to make sure that we have visibility on forestry operations on a day-to-day basis. We're going through the process of modernizing all of our systems so that we will be able to prove in the future that Gabonese timber is legal, Gabonese timber is carbon positive, carbon timber is biodiversity positive, and that Gabonese timber is socially responsible. And we see FSC and the other certification systems as a key component to these reforms and a key component to the future of forestry in Gabon. So today, illegal forestry is right down again. All of Gabon's forestry industry are engaging in various levels of certification, some starting with legality certification before they move on to ecosystem certification. Our system of sustainable forestry, where we cut just 2 trees per hectare on average, once every 25 years, has proved to be carbon positive. Our 5 decades of environmental governance mean that our deforestation levels have remained less than 0.1%, actually closer to 0.05% over 5 decades. Our forest scientists have proved that Gabonese forestry is carbon positive. So at the end of a 25-year rotation, we actually have more carbon in the forest, in the logged forest, than we would have had we not logged that forest. And because Gabon has maintained its forest cover at 88%, that makes Gabon the country that net absorbs the most CO2 out of the atmosphere of any country on Earth. We are net absorbing over 100 million tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year and fixing it in our forests. And that carbon is living, breathing carbon. So like a good wine, our carbon credits mature over time, accumulating biodiversity co-benefits. So it is our opinion that if we're going to save the Congo Basin forests, and the reality is that we have no choice but to keep the Congo Basin standing, because they store about 10 years of global emissions of CO2. They send rainfall to the Sahel and to Ethiopia. And so a world without the Congo Basin standing is not viable. We believe that this method, this economy of exploiting forests sustainably to save the forests is the only way that we're going to maintain forests into the future. That by cutting trees in Gabon and processing trees in Gabon to create jobs and livelihoods for the Gabonese people, we raise the value of the forest and we turn the Gabonese people into the forest guardians, because they will be protecting the livelihoods of their children and of their children's children. So I say to the FSC membership, thank you. Thank you for putting in place this process that exists to iteratively improve forest management over time. I say to the world, buy Gabonese timber if you want to save the Gabonese rainforests. And perhaps we can transform what is happening in Gabon into a model for saving tropical rainforests around the world. This partnership between governments, sand management, and independent verification of our efforts on the ground by FSC is a real winner. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Minister Lee White there for that very supportive message. I'm going to hand you straight over now to your facilitators and to the panel for this session. Your facilitators are Juan Ancieta, who is the Head of Environmental Management at Arauco, and Pina Gavassi, who is FSC's Climate and Restoration Director. Please, would you come up and take it away?
Is it working? Yes. Is it working? Can you hear me? Yeah.
And what about me? Yes. Hi, everybody. Hi, Pina. How are you?
Hi, Juan. Well, I'm very happy to be here and talk with all of you about great ideas, successful partnerships, and effective collaboration to address together the climate and biodiversity crisis that our society is facing now.
And I'm very happy also to be here and with this tremendous panel that we have today. And we will start up right away presenting two great women that will be joining us. One is actually here. Her name is Esther Roena, and I invite her to come up to the stage. She's the Director of Global Expansion and Partnership of Climate Projects in South Pole. So a big applause for her, please. Thank you for being here. And virtually, directly out of Chile, we have Valentina Lira. She is the Sustainable Director of Chilean biggest and most famous winery, Concha y Toro. So, Valentina, can you hear us?
Yes.
You should be online.
Yes, Juan, I can hear you, and happy to be here and sharing this panel with you.
Thank you that you are here with us.
And I would like to introduce our other panelists, Dr. Michael Brady, Principal Scientist at CIFOR-ICRAF, based in the headquarters in Indonesia, and very much engaged in many FSC processes over the last years. And our other panelist, which is remotely in New York. Are you, Stephen? Stephen Donofrio, Managing Director of Ecosystem Marketplace, a Forest Trends Initiative. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Great. So, oh, sorry. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
So let me kick off immediately with Valentina, and she has had a tremendous experience with FSC in Chile. And I will ask you, Valentina, what was your company's motivation and approach for implementing the FSC ecosystem services procedure? How have you seen the benefits coming out of this process? And the most amazing thing for me is how do you link this procedure with your net zero commitment and targets?
Okay, thank you, Juan. Actually, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you because, as you know, I am part of the sustainability team in Viña Concha y Toro. We are the second largest winery in the world, and actually, we are a non-forest company. I mean, forestry is not our business. Making wine is our business. So for us, it was a very challenging idea to work with the FSC standard in order to certify the forest management that we have in the natural forest surrounding our vineyards. we were able to see many years ago, like 15 years ago, we started with the protection of the natural forest in the surrounding areas of the vineyards, because we were able to realize that the forest was providing us different ecosystemic services, like regulation of the hydrological cycles, and also the erosion, and was helping us with the compactation of the soil, and also providing biodiversity for the vineyards in the places we were having this natural forest. So we started with the FSC standard, the ecosystem services, for the carbon capture of the forest, the natural forest that we have. And it was very interesting to realize that also the certification with the FSC standard was able to provide us also not only with the protection of the forest, but also was helping us with the relationship that we have with the communities, the local communities as well. So it has been a very good process, and also is very helpful for us in order to comply with our commitment of being a net zero company. We have been measuring the carbon footprint of the company for 15 years as well. And we were able to see that valuing or adding value to the forest is the only way that we will be able to reach the goal of being a net zero company, because of the regeneration practices that we are putting in place, also the afforestation that we have in place in the different states that we have in the central area of the country. And now we are able to measure the carbon stock that we have in the forest, and we are able to see that the nature-based solutions is going to be the real solution for the climate crisis that we have today, that we are all facing today. So we are doing that effort in order to put value and to realize how the forest is beneficial, not also at the local level, but also at the global level. So that's the main task that we are doing today.
Thank you, Valentina. It's a great example, I think, to have this sort of idea of protecting forest, and at the same time not being a forest company, to address those issues in order to transform it into your net zero strategy. Which brings me to pass the word to Esther, because I want to ask Esther, maybe not everybody is familiar with South Pole, but South Pole is a big institution, and you have an important role there. You are traveling the world looking for partnership. So tell us a little bit about your company, and how do you see FSC right now? We know that you have a partnership with us as FSC too. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. And I'm very glad to be here. I'm actually really happy I made it up here without tripping on the stairs. Yeah, so thanks for having us. South Pole has really been one of the initial, so-called traditional carbon project developers. And ever since the foundation in 2006, we have developed roughly over 1,000 projects across basically all world regions, and also different technologies. The last, more to say, 7 to 8 years, we have been specifically focusing on nature-based solutions. So we're looking at forest conservation, restoration, improved forest management, or also blue carbon projects. And so really today, we see our role as a one-stop shop for climate solutions, so to say. And that essentially means that we leverage carbon finance through the sales of carbon credits to corporate and public buyers, to projects which are implemented in collaboration either with NGOs, local communities, forest owners, so all of that. And in essence, how that basically works is that on the project side, we on one hand provide technical assistance, This means that we push the project with the implementation partner on the ground through the certification process under international standards, such as VERA or Gold Standard. This includes initial eligibility assessments, setting up a monitoring system, and then bringing the credits basically to issuance. And on the financial side, while we know that it can be a hurdle to initially cover the costs of the setup and the certification of the projects, that's usually a part we cover as well, and then share the benefits and the revenues coming back from the projects. And on the, so to say, on the corporate side, then again, we engage with our buyers on their emission reduction strategy. So usually over scope 1, 2, and 3, where we initially do calculate their own footprint, but then at the advisory and advising them basically on their reduction strategies in terms of renewable energy, in terms of their supply chain, and then offer for the remaining residuous emissions compensation through carbon credits from the portfolio of projects we develop with our partners.
Awesome, thank you.
And thank you, Michael. We were talking about nature-based solutions, and Esther mentioned the importance of nature-based solutions in the new climate finance world. And between nature-based solutions, considering sustainable forest management, and one of these solutions, conservation as well, but also the restoration of forest landscapes. What is the approach that CIFOR is taking in relation to scaling up forest landscape restoration? Which challenges do you see in order to demonstrate real impacts connected to restoration efforts? And what is the role that you see FSC playing in that space?
Okay, thank you, Pina. Good morning to all, to my colleagues in Indonesia. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera. As the largest global forestry and agroforestry research organization in the Global South, the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry, or CIFOR-ICRAF. I hope you're all aware of our recent merger. We began publishing forest landscape sustainability concepts in the early 2000s and subsequent research on landscape restoration in the 2010s. As detailed in the restoration session earlier this morning, which was a very, very good session, we know that issues and approaches to forest landscape restoration are complex and are evolving and changing over time. So I'd like to review some of the progress on restoration research, but I'd first like to acknowledge CIFOR's premier restoration scientist, Manuel Garagata, based in Lima, and I think many of our Latin American colleagues here know Manuel. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here with us today. But in about 2010, we looked at specific landscapes for restoration across a number of continents, Peru, Brazil, Mexico, Kenya, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and regional activities. For example, a large Regreening Africa restoration program, which was farmer-centered. In 2011, we were introduced to the Bond Challenge for replanting 150 million trees by 2020, and this certainly triggered for CIFOR and ICRAF to accelerate its focus on forest landscape restoration. Around 2016, we were further challenged by the need to scale up restoration activities and to meet international commitments in the 3 UN conventions. We've then also expanded our focus towards more social, institutional, and economic dimensions of forest landscape restoration. So we began publishing decision support tools Also upscaling capacity development, and that was emphasized this morning, the need for training and better understanding of restoration approaches. We published more towards 2018-19 articles on planning, the importance of planning to assist natural regeneration. Again, another topic emphasized this morning to shift and somewhat more depend on natural systems for restoration. In 2020, we contributed to the principles and standards for the practice of restoration. So Manuel was a key member under the Society for Ecological Restoration in issuing these, the second version of these principles. We saw the World Economic Forum also issue another challenge for 1 million trees to be planted. And this triggered even more work by CIFOR-ICRAF. We began addressing issues around land tenure, responsive approaches to restoration, and stakeholder perceptions of the legal frameworks around restoration, and a lot more focus on the socioeconomic challenges and opportunities for tree planting. More recently, we've expanded or come back to our initial focus on biophysical and evaluation aspects by looking at prediction approaches to biodiversity recovery by natural tropical forest growth, collaborative monitoring systems, mapping the information landscape around restoration, and a big focus on participatory approaches to landscape restorations. And this included, for example, the development of mobile applications for local communities to track restoration. Over the next decade, we will continue focusing on topics such as collaborative monitoring, fostering natural forest regeneration, the economic and policy interventions needed for restoration success, and an increased focus on including agroforestry systems within restoration activities. So what are some of the key challenges that we're facing around restoration? Well, we're really focused on dispelling some of the tree planting misconceptions. We coined the phrase, planting the wrong tree in the wrong place and many left untended, as expressing a concern about the over reliance on just tree planting and not tree managing. We see learning, the importance of learning as a strategic forest landscape restoration approach, boosting governance in secondary forests, and continued focus on supporting local communities to boost reforestation. The issue of natural regeneration as a restoration strategy, something we'll also continue with, and more assessments of restoration success, failures, and challenges. We're also looking at additional opportunities for restoration in the area, for example, of biomass for energy, livelihoods, and restoration in the global south, and looking at particular ecosystems, for example, peatlands here in Southeast Asia, benefiting from restoration to reduce fire and haze and enhance climate mitigation. So what roles can FSC play connected to these challenges? Well, certainly the remedy framework that we've heard about this week is a big step towards forest landscape restoration. And CIFOR was, I was on the working group under the remedy framework and was able to bring in some of the restoration principles that I've mentioned earlier under the Society for Ecological Restoration. Financing is another area that FSC can really enhance forest and landscape restoration. FSC has the means through its commercial forestry activities to address some of the financial constraints. Applying restoration as a climate change mitigation measure, again, going back to the remedy policy to reduce deforestation and forest degradation and maintain intact forests through these policies. Lastly, FSC has a rich repository of data from its members, and this data will provide a very important resource for research, knowledge generation, and lessons learned. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And talking about financing nature-based solutions projects and the need to deliver market benefits as well beyond carbon through the whole range of ecosystem services, I would like to ask Stephen, what is the approach that Forest Trends is taking in relation to the big opportunities in the ecosystem services markets? And how do you see the uptake of these benefits by local communities and indigenous peoples? As Michael said, it is really important to engage local communities and indigenous peoples and secure the access to those benefits by them.
Thank you, Pina, and thank you everybody for having me here today virtually. Apologies for not being able to be with you in person, but nevertheless, this is a very important conversation. So I represent Forest Trends, which is a nonprofit organization based out of Washington, D.C. I have a number of colleagues that work in various pieces of our puzzle related to nature-based solutions. And so I will briefly talk about one area that our organization is focused on, supporting nature-based solutions, but ensuring that indigenous people are at the table, have an opportunity for fair and equitable revenue sharing from market-based approaches, and are also respected in terms of their support of biodiversity and other benefits that indigenous people provide, not just carbon, but other non-carbon benefits as well. And that's through our communities and territorial governance initiative. I have a colleague in the room there today, Carla Cardenas, who I'm sure would be happy to speak to more detail on this. But effectively, it is a very unique initiative within the organization, and it has developed an even more unique partnership called the People's Forest Partnership. And they've done this in collaboration with the private sector, with other nonprofit and charitable organizations, but also with indigenous organizations as well. And the goal of the People's Forest Partnership is to bring $20 billion per year by 2030 into projects to support, as I mentioned, indigenous communities, but through environmental markets, carbon markets primarily, with the opportunity to support through the carbon finance mechanism that these markets provide. As was mentioned in the introduction, I run our Ecosystem Marketplace initiative, which for the past 20 years has been tracking the sales of carbon credits in the voluntary carbon market. Now we have expanded a bit to cover not just the voluntary carbon market, because there are sector-based approaches now that are favoring market-based approaches, such as the International Civil Aviation Organization has developed the carbon reduction scheme, including offsets, to help international airlines meet their reduction goals. And so we're tracking credits that are eligible for that program. We're tracking other compliance-based credits based on the sales that are reported to us confidentially by a growing number of organizations around the world. So we're based in Washington, D.C. We have a team that is focused on engaging with project developers, intermediaries, investors, so they could be brokers, traders, marketplaces, but really what we find to be our special source of relationships is with product developers, those that are developing credits, as South Pole is one of those examples. There are over 230 organizations worldwide that are reporting projects that are based in 100 different locations, country locations. They represent all project types. So, you know, we don't have a particular view on what project type should be eligible or can be used by the voluntary market, but instead are capturing transportation projects, energy efficiency and fuel switching, industrial manufacturing projects. But what we are finding is that nature-based solutions projects are increasing in terms of not just projects that are being developed, a new supply of credits that are being issued, because it's not just it's not a one-sided equation here. There's a demand part of this market that is increasingly seeking what is being called high integrity credits, but in that high integrity category, there's also different interpretations. But many consider that nature-based projects to be very valuable in terms of the benefits that they provide beyond carbon, as well as the climate benefits. So it's really positive to see the Forest Stewardship Council moving in this direction, because historically the way that we have tracked these sales from these organizations that report to us has been to ask the details of the project, which then allow us to understand what co-benefit certifications they might have. And in the carbon market, there are some clear co-benefit certification programs, such as the Climate, Community, and Biodiversity Standard, the Sustainable Development Goals, SD Vista. So these are add-on certifications to Verra, which is the largest carbon standard in terms of volume issued and transacted annually. But Gold Standard, Plan Vivo, and others are integrating SDGs into the projects so that we can be sure that biodiversity, social safeguards, and other aspects are included in those projects as they're being certified and verified with those programs. And what we are uniquely looking to try to do, and what we've been doing for these 2 decades that we've been tracking the market, has been to try to answer that key question of, are buyers willing to pay more for credits that have additional benefits? Because we know that they cost more to have those benefits. You have to do additional rounds of verification, more documentation, more site visits, et cetera, et cetera. And what we've been really glad to see in the last couple of years is that not only is now, historically, there was a preference for projects that had these additional benefits, but now we're actually seeing the purchasing of to also include higher prices for those projects that have those additional benefits. So as our global benchmark of pricing has risen over the past several years, and we're now roughly around $4 a metric ton, but this is for the 500 million tons that were traded in 2021, of which nature-based projects represented about 40% of that volume. But we also found that 500 million tons of carbon that was traded in 2021 had a value of around $2 billion. So despite nature-based projects having roughly about 40% of the total volume, we find that the value associated to nature-based projects is about 65% of that $2 billion. So we know that buyers are paying more for these credits, and then buyers are also paying more when those credits are additionally certified, just as we see with Gold Standard projects, we see that with Plan Vivo projects, and we see that with Verra projects that have the additional certifications of Climate, Community, and Biodiversity and SD Vista. So what we recently established a partnership with FSC, and in my closing for my opening remarks here, what we are looking to do is try to understand how FSC certification, if we can help to tell that story a bit more and unearth all the values that go into FSC certification, how can we show where prices sit and where the demand interests are for projects with FSC certification? The reason why this has been challenging to date is because the carbon markets have sat separate from FSC certification. So, but as we bring this together and we find and we're requesting more information from the project developers to include FSC certification in the attributes that they're identifying for their project boundaries. This will help us identify which projects have FSC certification, then we can run better pricing analysis based on that information. So very excited about this work that we're embarking on with FSC. Excited to see how this conversation goes and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this was actually the coming question on how do you see FSC supporting and working with you on our common ambitions? And what will be the message you would like to share today with all the FSC membership?
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, CIFOR-ICRAF has been engaged with FSC quite rigorously over the last decades, most recently contributing to things like technical working groups. We're contributed to the framework, the remedy framework and remedy procedure. Another is the smallholder standard that's been approved for the East Asia region. So direct engagement with FSC activities. Indirectly, we have acted as to some degree, evaluator of the effectiveness of certification. So we've published numerous articles evaluating the effectiveness of forest certification standards, including FSC. So we act as a sort of an independent provider of research information and conclusions. We have more recently discussed a new agreement with FSC where CIFOR-ICRAF can support even more research on topics such as restoration, certification effectiveness, and we very much look forward to working with FSC in this new way forward. Thank you.
Yeah, on our end, so also since I believe end of last year, early this year, we have also entered a collaboration with FSC, mainly focused on introducing the opportunity of carbon project development to the FSC members, but then also looking at potentially other ecosystem service and payment options through other markets and potential products such as biodiversity offsets, and also looking at scope-free supply chain interventions and claims. But I just want to highlight overall, I really think more broadly speaking, the role of FSC is to facilitate this dialogue between the different stakeholders. And I think seeing really that organizations like yourself see the opportunity in markets like carbon markets and a, so to say, untapped market for some of your members, making the introduction for South Pole to those members to enable them actually market their product. I think that's a very important point. I think also on the even more technical side, you are developing already different tools and quantification methods, which, to be very honest, already build the scaffold for actual carbon certification. So the initial step for the certification is already out there. And by introducing some of your members to organizations like South Pole, we can take that up and actually enable those to participate in a market in which ultimately they already do and implement those sustainable activities on the ground.
Valentina? How do you see that? How do you see the role of FSC regarding that question?
Well, I have to say that, since we have, we're a certified company, but we maybe have a little different perspective because of the nature of our business. And what we have seen is that FSC has been a wonderful tool for us in order to improve the sustainable performance of the company in general. Okay, not only in our relation with the forest. Maybe we are able to see that because for us it was more like a distant kind of certification. So we were able to realize all the benefits during the implementation process, and also in every year when we are working with the standards and all the relations that the standard is requesting us to see and also to manage. For instance, for us, has been very useful in the, not only in the, as I said, not only inside, but also in the relation that we have with our suppliers. You know that the suppliers for us are able to provide us all of the packaging materials made of forest products. So now we are able to have a different perspective in order to work with the suppliers and also be able to make the FSC certification visible in our products. So that's something that's very good. It was unexpected, but it was something that it comes also with the certification. And we are able to communicate that to the consumers. Today, we are facing, new consumers more aware of the climate crisis and also the deforestation of the forest, and they are very sensitive to that kind of topics. So now we are able also to send the message through the FSC supplies that we have in all of our bottles, and we are able to send the message finally to the final consumer in order to support that kind of initiative. So we are able to make that visible. And as I said, also with the local communities, the relationship that we have with the local communities today have a new dimension, which is the forest, because the forest actually unite us in the territories, in the different lands. We are an agricultural company, so we have a different kind of relation with the local communities. So this is something that is a new kind of conversation, is a new kind of relation that we are putting in place in the territories, in the local communities that we are present. And also something that was very is very good for us and is very unexpected, something that we saw that this is a kind of improvement is at the ESG standards or ESG rankings or evaluations. Since all of the different rankings in which we participate, they are also requesting information on how are you, behaving around deforestation or biodiversity loss. What are you doing in order to avoid biodiversity loss? And also, how are you including the climate, the nature-based solutions in order to fight climate change? So for us, it has been a very good tool in order to support all of the different activities and different initiatives that we have in place. So I think that this is and non-deforestation, for instance, is a very good, I would say, is a very good example. The commitment with the non-deforestation is something that has been a very strong commitment and a very strong message in all of the ESG rankings and evaluations that we participate. Has been a very good message, and I think that this is something that is a very good value that is held by FSC. It's something that is very good for the forest companies that can participate in the program. But I want you to be aware that the forest companies are not the only ones having forests. There is a lot of different kind of companies or different sectors, like agricultural sector, that is owner of the forest or owner of different kinds of forests. In our case, we are very linked with the Mediterranean forest, which is, one of the most endemic and most more and has the smallest kind of land compared with some other kind of forest, the Amazonic forest or rainforest or any other kind of forest. So if we want to, multiply, I would say, multiply the effect or the benefits of the system, I will try to send you the message for FSC, maybe to think out of the box. This is a very huge standard for protection, for conservation, regeneration of the natural forest, and maybe there is some other kind of companies like an agricultural company in this case that might be interested in have this kind of certification and have this to be also under the FSC umbrella. So it's a good thing, I think, maybe to invite some or encourage some other kind of companies to engage with the FSC scheme as well. I think it's a very huge opportunity for Forest Stewardship Council, and I would love to see more companies engage, not only forest companies engage with the FSC, also more companies in the agricultural business or any other kind of business that is related to the forest, because it's something very good, not only for the forest, but also for the companies as well.
Strong message, Valentina. What about you, Stephen, in relationship with the question that Pina asked? What would be the central message that you want to deliver today for our members?
Yeah, I'll maybe say two things from two different perspectives. One is that in another part of our work within Ecosystem Marketplace, we've for the last 8 years researched companies and their commitments to ending or addressing deforestation in their commodity supply chains. And what we've found time and time again is that in the timber and pulp category, we look at multiple different commodities: palm oil, soy, cocoa, and palm oil, in addition to pulp and timber, that we see that certification is the most commonly cited route that companies are taking to address the deforestation within their commodity supply chains. So what we're starting to see, and I think through this conversation we're having here today, and where this could go for the carbon markets, is that if buyers will start to see a differentiation between projects that maybe not even just improve forest management. This could be a cookstove project, clean cookstove project, where the fuel source is an FSC certified area of land and forest, that instead of it being virgin timber that is being cut down without any certification for fuel wood, or it could also be a REDD+ or forest conservation project where there's components of it that are around improved forest management or sustainable forest management. There's timber extraction, and if we can, I think if the market as a whole were to start to see the differentiation of that FSC certification, well, we know that it's already working on the companies that are looking to address a deforestation risk in their upstream of their supply chains. That potentially now, and I'd be interested in my colleague from South Pole's perspective, but companies, from our understanding, are very concerned about the supply that they're purchasing. They want this supply to have validity, to have value, to pass integrity tests. And if FSC certification can hold that value for those buyers, then I think that would be a positive opportunity for FSC.
Thank you, Stephen. So we still have 20 minutes left, and I guess it's the perfect time to open the floor if somebody wants to ask questions. We have the gentleman over here, the gentleman in the back, and then over here, maybe those, and here. So 4 questions initially. If you can help me with the mics. Here.
Thank you very much, Petrus Gunarso, Economic South individual. Indonesia has taken almost all good study results from CIFOR-ICRAF and any other studies, in particular for the studies on environmental services. And it is proven because Indonesia has then declared and committed through NDC, Nationally Determined Commitment, in Paris in 2015, reducing emission 29% on its own, and 41% if supported by, let's say, FSC or any other countries outside Indonesia. So in that pledge, the 29% reduction of emission, 60% rely on pollution, rely on forest and land use. It is therefore Indonesia has implemented what we call it moratorium in 64 million hectares of our production forest and other forests, which is degraded now. So we are looking forward actually to really see the real investment from our colleague from the north, the economic north or the north, to invest in Indonesia, particularly for restoration and afforestation. Restoration for the outer island of Java and afforestation for Java. And both are requiring also certification from FSC. So the market for those products, both from the community and the company, will be also filling the demand, which is growing, because right now we have 8 billion people by coming few days probably. And the consumption of timber will be increased, non-timber also increase, and food, feed, everything from the forest. Therefore, Indonesia, again, I would like to reiterate that Indonesia has pledged in Paris to reduce the emission on our own, but we need support and help from you all, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, who wants to comment on that? Maybe Michael?
Well, makasih Pak. Thank you for that comment. I guess one response is there's huge areas of Indonesia that have, where there's been deforestation, and these are large areas of commercial forestry production, mainly plantations. So there's a great opportunity for these areas to come back under certification. And so there's a real challenge for millions of hectares of forestry areas that could be certified at some point in the future. And so I would really encourage FSC through its remedy framework to be, I guess, discussed this week as one avenue to be able to foster more certification in countries like Indonesia, which has vast forestry resources yet to be certified. So thank you.
Gentleman in the back over there.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Lucio Rocco from Italy Environmental Law Chamber. So I have a comment, a suggestion, and 2 questions. I'll be very fast. Forest provides products, food. They provide services, food, medicines. FSC, with the forest management standard, is balancing all of them. This is not happening with carbon standards. In fact, carbon standards, they call poverty reduction, water, co-benefits, other benefits. Research is showing us that a responsible managed forest according to FSC is always conserving carbon or restoring it. Now, my first suggestion is to Sao Paulo. I hope in the agreement with FSC, you will also commit to certify all your 1,000 projects according to FSC standards, because we need more FSC certified forests. And then I have two questions for the panel. You can decide. What is the role of the FSC ecosystem service procedure, in your opinion, given the ongoing collaboration? And then I have a specific question for Stephen. Stephen, we have been sending to ecosystem marketplace the result of the companies supporting forest manager according to the ecosystem services procedure, but those data, they never appear in the report. So the question is, why does it have to be a credit in order to be reported in the market for ecosystem services? Thank you.
So I propose, let's start with that final question maybe, Stephen, and then we go to South Pole, which was directly mentioned also.
I think I understood the question, and if I misinterpret this, then please let me know or follow up with me afterwards. But the reports I'm assuming you're referring to are the State of the Voluntary Carbon Market reports. So this would be specifically focusing on carbon credits as the primary unit or the primary commodity, and then if there are other certifications that get added on to a carbon standard issuance of a credit, then we would also cover that information, not just in our reports, but we also have a lot of data, and we'd be happy to discuss whether or not any of the data that we do not end up publishing in our reports could be of use for you or any of your colleagues. But I think that may be the primary reason, is that if it is not associated with a carbon standard and therefore a carbon credit, then we wouldn't define that as part of the voluntary carbon credit market, and therefore would not include it as a standalone credit type within our report.
Esther?
So quickly on the suggestion, also for us, thank you for that. In fact, all improved forest management projects which have been certified by South Pole have initially already been FSC certified. But you're absolutely right. Also under our current collaboration, we're looking at new projects which we want to develop jointly, and there an FSC certification would absolutely been the basis on which we would certify carbon. And as I said, ultimately the FSC standard and the certification is already a quality stamp. I agree to that. And again, it is the backbone for the actual carbon certification. Now on other types of products or co-benefits, and I also want to quickly highlight that I agree with some of the comments also in the audience, that we often talk about carbon and that the other co-benefits which come with it. Now, obviously, especially all these nature-based solution projects are entire landscape programs where biodiversity gains, poverty reduction, job creation, that's the main reason why the communities and the implementing organizations are involved in it. And carbon is essentially the the byproduct. So it happens that we have already created a market-based approach and mechanism for it, and a tradable unit, which is globally comparable as it is 1 ton of CO2. So that makes it, in that sense, easier. Now, I am personally absolutely in favor of looking at other benefits, so to say, at biodiversity or water, where also different market mechanisms are slowly coming into the voluntary market, but specifically, for instance, on biodiversity, some countries have already created a compliance market for it. And in that sense, South Pole is also involved in markets such as Colombia or Australia, where next to a carbon compliance market, a biodiversity compliance market is actually effective and running. So I'd be very happy to see and happy to push with our standing in the market to also implement these other products and units for these other ecosystem services.
Right, which leaves room for the last question. I think Lucho was saying, which is the role of the ecosystem services inside FSC. Could that maybe be a way of looking at those markets? Maybe who wants to take that question? Michael or no?
Blue carbon. Definitely, there are also new project types. We're also looking at where South Pole is also actively involved in the methodology development. For instance, the latest blue carbon, and specifically on mangrove restoration and conservation methodology under Vera, was developed by us. And we're also looking at other types like seagrass, kelp, and we definitely see great potential in those project types. Yeah.
Okay, so we have questions left, I guess. And can you bring me the mic over here? Both ways.
Okay, thank you, Harry Purnomo from CIFOR-ICRAF and IPB University. My question perhaps to Stephen. I can easily see the link between FSC certification and carbon credit or REDD+. My question, is there any evidence of a carbon payment or REDD+ payment to FSC certified forest, to FMU that been FMU certified? If there is any, I would like to know how much, how big, where, and what steps they did to get that payment, and also the case of a biodiversity payment. Thank you.
Stephen?
That's a very good question, and I appreciate it very much, because we are, with this partnership with FSC, one of the primary questions is to answer that. We do not yet have that level of information because of the way, as I mentioned before, how the carbon credit projects have been, disassociated in many ways from the FSC certification when it comes to how they're listed onto the carbon credit standards registries. The FSC certification details are relatively absent. And so what we're trying to do with this collaboration is first understand of the core non-carbon, which I would completely agree that this is not to say carbon is the best or is number one, and then there are other benefits, but there are non-carbon benefits in addition to carbon benefits to these projects. But what we are looking to do is to first understand the value of the non-carbon benefits, and then to be able to ask project developers specifically, some of these questions you just raised, which is how and why did you go about FSC certification for this project, and was the driver because you knew that potentially you would have a better a buyer interested in FSC certification for the project, or that it would be more marketable, or would the price be higher if you sold it with FSC certification versus without it? So these are specifically the questions that that we're looking to answer, and hopefully this time next year, no doubt we will have answers to those questions, and hopefully even by the end of this year we'll have some preliminary information to answer those questions.
Thank you, Stephen. And I have a spoiler for that, because particularly in Arauco in Chile, we're working on a RED Plus project that is, we partner with FSC and also with South Pole and with ISA, which is a company that has a program. It's called Conexión Jaguar. In Chile, it's called Conexión Puma, which is actually a VCS project of RED Plus, and it has CCB co-benefits, so to say. So that would be like an example of one of the projects that are probably coming. And with what Stephen was saying, we will have probably a list of other projects going on. Pina, you wanted to add something else?
Yes, I would like to encourage you to maybe meet Nelson Kroll from Maderacre, who might be here, which is a FSC certified concession in the Peruvian Amazon that has FSC certification plus BCS certification and ecosystem services on top of it. So they've got the kind of complete full package and it will be great for them to share their experiences as well.
Awesome. I think we are coming at the end, but I had one question here, and then I don't know if I have to close or the last one there also. Which was the gentleman that had? Okay, here. Yep.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for allowing me to ask a question. Raul Lopez from Guatemala. I think that this topic has been absolutely impressive, the topic of restoration of green areas in Africa, and also the challenge, the bond challenge regarding 200 million trees. I think this is very important. I think this really will have an impact on climate change. I was going to ask whether there is a monitoring mechanism to determine the success of these projects, but you also mentioned about collaborative monitoring, and I'm sure that that is part of all this. I would like to know your opinion in particular, regarding two restoration approaches that I have been hearing about, in particular in smaller countries, the ecological restoration and productive restoration. In certain areas, in small countries, the smallholders need to create the conditions for restoration to ensure the ecology of the forest, life within that natural forest, but at the same time they need productive restoration so that they have a means to ensure their lives. So I would like to know if there is any information regarding these approaches, and I'm talking in particular about small countries and small producers. This is an issue that is very important. Michael?
Restoration and productive restoration, taking into account, especially that in small countries, smallholders, the productive side is very important. So is something distinguished between the two? Can the two correlate together, live together?
Well, thank you for that, and I hope the translation is working well. Great question. I think I reviewed some of the the evolution of research on restoration, where there was initially a very strong focus on ecological restoration by itself, assuming that the degraded ecosystems could be left alone and that there would be efforts to restore these areas. But I think we've realized that you cannot separate communities, human activities from degraded lands, let alone forests. So I mentioned in my talk a focus for CIFOR-ICRAF. Again, part of our name is agroforestry, and we are doing more and more looking at agroforestry systems as an approach to restoration, where native species, biodiversity can be brought into degraded areas, but also provide livelihoods to local communities, local and indigenous communities. There's some great examples of agroforestry around the world. It's practiced in many parts of the global south, here in Indonesia. Some very good examples where you can achieve biodiversity improvements as well as economic options for communities. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a last question over there, the gentleman.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Monsieur Gessel Bill Kabamba de la
Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Is your question for any
Thank you very much.
specifically or just general? Because
Oui.
Spanish.
Oui, et je pense qu'il y aurait peut-être, je n'ai pas maîtrisé les différents noms, mais Madame, je pense qu'il est à côté de celui qui est au début là. Donc,
I think that the lady is perhaps next to the lady on the panel. Well, somebody from the panel can perhaps answer this. My question is also for the gentleman who's also connected via Zoom. The question is for the lady in the panel. My name is Samon Kamamba. I'm from the Congo Basin. And I work in the Democratic Republic of Congo also. Everything that's been mentioned previously regarding the system that's been presented today would be of great interest to our country. In our country, there's enormous diversity, but we also face tremendous challenges in the spaces where we have different peat for it, with the important presence of peat. And this plays an important role in relation to carbon emissions. My main concern is as follows. With FSC, we have a series of, let's say, rules which will enable us to achieve certification. But which procedure could we propose in order to include mangroves and also peat areas so that we're subsequently able to implement all of the different initiatives and benefits that have been mentioned in this presentation?
The question is related to peatlands and to manglers. So because those ecosystems are very important, and how do you address those kinds of ecosystem? He wants to ask Stephen and maybe the other guys.
I'm happy to defer to my colleague because I've responded to a few questions already, so I'll defer to somebody else.
Okay.
I can comment on that. I am an actual peatland specialist here in Southeast Asia, but familiar with peatland, tropical peatland issues in Latin America, Africa, and East Asia. I'm not an FSC specialist, so I can't address how FSC addresses peatland management specifically, but there are some very clear approaches, guidelines on peatland management in the global south, issues around water table management, vegetation management, to preserve as much as possible peatlands being developed. I'm just assuming that the principles and criteria under FSC do address all ecosystem types, including peatlands, but clearly there are some specific features because of the hydrological conditions in peatlands that need particular focus. But it's a very good point, and maybe something our FSC colleagues can take up. I know there are other certification systems such as VERA, which do have a peatland component, so they have developed that. But I can't answer your question specifically on FSC. Thank you.
Okay, guys, so we are in time, past time actually, and it's time to thank everybody. Valentina from Chile, it's very late at night already. Steven, Michael, Esther, we're very happy to have you here, and I think it was an awesome conversation. Thank you again in the name of FSC and all the membership. Thank you.
It's always a good sign when you run out of time before you run out of questions. Well done, congratulations, thank you. I have nothing more to say. A brief announcement. A pair of spectacles lost last night. We have them. I understand, of course, that if I'm holding your spectacles, you may not be able to see whether or not these are actually your spectacles. So I will give these back to Camilla Carstensen, who many of you know, who is more likely to save them than I am. And we will put a photograph up here at the beginning of the Members' Assembly so you can find your way to the front. See you all at various side meetings at 2, and then again in the Members' Assembly at 4. Thank you very much.